lorem ipsum.
I sense you've come to me for the 3 words to make you a senior engineer. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. I get all of this junk, and then you tell me I don't know? My hair. I'm dressed like a bum. I'm a senior engineer. Hey, my name is Hadi Ayub and I've built tech and teams for some of Australia's most notable organizations. In this video, I'm going to sell you on the idea that embracing those 3 magic words, I don't know, either for yourself or within your team, has plenty of upsides. But first, I'm going to show you why not embracing them is not only counterproductive, but a little dishonest. I work with TypeScript, Angular, and SCSS every single day. And at best, I've probably only ever come across half of the stuff that's contained in the documentation. How much of it I could confidently recite off the top of my head? Way less than that. And that's not even considering things like tooling, libraries, architectural approaches, programming methodologies. To illustrate just how much there is to know, or I guess not know, let's do a quick comparison. Here's a number of questions on Stack Exchange for woodworking, photography, and aviation. And by the way, I bet these are all fields that you could be a lifelong learner in. But compare that to a number of questions for JavaScript alone. It's pretty crazy, right? As software engineers, not knowing stuff is a routine, accepted part of our day in a way that's unique to our industry. Thankfully.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Cabin crew, could you please prepare for landing?
Alright. How do you land a plane?
Please remain calm. We've got an answer with 50 upvotes.
Another thing we have going against us is that the things we learn can quickly become irrelevant. If you're into, say, woodworking and you learn a neat way to join 2 pieces of wood, there is no risk of Facebook buying it and shutting it down. And that's not a random hypothetical either. Facebook once did this to a service called Pass, which powered over 500,000 apps. Or have a look at these 200,000 or so questions about AngularJS. Again, it's a wealth of knowledge that's now completely irrelevant. When things like Pass or AngularJS die off, they've already been replaced by like a dozen alternatives that you could spend another 100 or 1,000 hours learning. It's like, learn Bootstrap because CSS sucks, and then we learn Bootstrap, and now there's Flex, and now there's freaking Tail. The point I'm trying to make is, it's impossible to know even a small fraction of what's out there. You should expect not to know things. But as obvious as it might seem when we lay it out like this, our industry is filled with people who will smile and nod their way through the day, and then scroll through LinkedIn posts about imposter syndrome at night. Every day, awesome engineers are moving away from hands-on roles because they feel like they can't keep up with this avalanche of new stuff. Every day, great candidates are sweating their way through interview questions about some random concept that really isn't that important. And every day, this fear of I don't know is costing teams money, efficiency, and a chunk of their happiness. So what do we do about it? The good news is, you don't need to know everything. And the market has decided it doesn't expect you to anyway. Engineering roles have become increasingly specialized, with many companies opting to structure their team by specialization instead of hiring just full stack engineers. It feels like the concept of a T-shaped engineer has become a lot more popular. A T-shaped engineer is someone who has working knowledge across a range of disciplines, but has one area where they opt to drill down and become an expert. In my opinion, this is the best way to shape your career and your skill set. For teams, structure around specialization like this will lead to more efficient hiring, a collectively more skilled team, and ultimately a better product and a better code base. Alright, you're interested in becoming a T-shaped engineer. There's still one more problem, and it also happens to be the big criticism of this whole T-shaped idea. It turns out that maintaining that T-shape is way easier said than done. As we saw earlier, even within a specialization, there can be so much to learn that it turns out to be just as overwhelming. The next logical questions are, how deep do you need to go into your chosen area of expertise, and how shallow can you be with everything else? I got you. To tackle this, I'm going to introduce what I've called the knowledge map. The knowledge map is a circle where we can plot any piece of knowledge that's relevant to a role. The closer something is to the center of the circle, the more often we rely on it. The closer something is to the edge of the circle, the less likely we are to need it. We'll also shade items in the knowledge map from green to red, depending on how well we know them. Green is well enough that you're comfortable teaching someone else, and red being something that you vaguely remember hearing about. As an example, for a web front-end engineer, knowledge of HTML syntax might be right at the center of the circle, whilst knowledge about the idempotency of HTTP methods would be closer to the edge. It's come up like twice in my career. For a back-end engineer, this might actually be the opposite, with HTML knowledge closer to the edge and HTTP knowledge closer to the middle. You get the idea. Now, rather than thinking about knowledge like a squirrel who's trying to gather nuts for the winter, you can be a lot more deliberate and tactical in what you learn. Maybe as a mid-level engineer, you might find your knowledge map looking like this, but as a senior, you feel like it should probably look like this. Well, then obviously you'd focus on those orange areas that you've identified you come across a lot, but you aren't as confident in. On the flip side, when you scroll across that cool new way to sort an array of 3-letter words, this clearly sits towards the edge of the circle and isn't worth learning. Or maybe it's something more substantial, like that GraphQL thing you keep hearing about. Well, is your team currently migrating to GraphQL? Do you see GraphQL pop up on job listings you're interested in? Great, it lives towards the center of your circle. Or is it something you feel the need to pick up just because it's the hot new thing? At this point, it sounds like it lives towards the edge of the circle. Maybe spend 10 minutes reading through the documentation to see if it actually has utility for you. And hey, if you get this calculation wrong and you end up needing something that you previously decided wasn't worth knowing, it's not the end of the world. You've always got those 3 magic words. And that's because I don't know isn't I will never know. It's more like, I don't know, but I can find out. The most interesting thing to point out here is that 1, your knowledge map is unique to you and your role. And 2, where knowledge sits in the circle is going to change between roles or even over time in the same role. With that understood, let's look at how we can parlay these ideas into real-world benefits for our engineering teams. A principle that I think is critical to scaling an engineering team that I never see discussed is to always consider the barrier to entry to the code base. And by that, I mean we want to minimize how much you need to know to contribute to the code. Consider a team of 10 engineers contributing to the same code base. As we saw earlier, they're all going to bring some knowledge to the table that's unique to them. And that's great, but if you're leading a team, it can get in the way of what you're trying to achieve, a code base that's consistent and easy to contribute to. If you're not cautious, over time, those relatively obscure bits of knowledge from each engineer start to creep into the code, and the knowledge map required to contribute to your code base starts to look like this. As you can imagine, this makes things really difficult for existing engineers. Now they've routinely got to get across new things that are rarely used. But even worse is that it hurts the ramp-up time for new hires, an important metric for a team's scalability. In a future video, I'll explore this more in depth, but at a high level, you need to be really good at answering this question. Does the benefit of whatever new feature, method, or tech is being proposed outweigh the cost of everyone else having to learn it? If yes, go right ahead. If no, then you're probably better off sticking with an option that your team's more familiar with. You'll find that a big part of this decision-making process boils down to how frequently will this new thing actually provide value? Or in other words, will it live towards the center of the knowledge map? And by the way, I'm not just talking about applying this decision-making process to big-ticket items like libraries or frameworks. I'm also talking about very low-level things like avoiding niche data structures. It sounds small and insignificant in isolation, but trust me, these things add up. If done correctly, you'll end up with less stuff to know, therefore less I don't knows, and your team spends time learning things that are actually delivering value. The same principle we just applied to our code base will also benefit our hiring process, especially in a market so short on talent. It doesn't make sense to unnecessarily filter out candidates just because they don't know everything you're currently using. If you're not already listing your jobs this way, one quick positive change you could make is listing your jobs in terms of need to haves and nice to haves. Need to haves being those core technologies you work with that are very broad and time consuming to learn. And nice to haves being those that are either less frequently encountered in your code or things that you could get a new hire across very quickly. For example, in an animation heavy Angular application, I would say Angular, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the need to haves because they're foundational to everything else in the application. But experience with Angular animation specifically could fall into the nice to haves. For a developer who has a good understanding of all the need to haves, I'm confident they could get across Angular animations quite easily. You should also mirror this de-emphasis on knowing everything off the top of your head in the way that you test your candidates. Steer clear of pop quiz style questions. Allow engineers to use the resources that they're used to. And most importantly, make sure that your tests resemble the work that they'll actually be doing day to day. That means maybe ditch the whiteboard. A lot of the stuff that we've looked at so far has been kind of big picture. And that's cool, but there are things that you can take away from this right now. For starters, if you are one of those people that has a reluctance to admit not knowing something, you'll find that letting that reluctance go is going to save you from a lot of wasted time and sticky situations. Second, being clear about what you do know and what you don't know is vital to building your professional credibility. And I don't mean to say this is general interview advice because every interviewer is going to respond differently. But for me, hearing a candidate admit that they don't know something makes me feel a hell of a lot more confident in the list of things that they've told me they do know. On the flip side, listening to someone dance around a topic that they clearly don't know isn't very confidence inspiring at all. Lastly, I want to point out that just as important as your willingness to say I don't know is how you respond to hearing it. The best engineers will see an I don't know as an opportunity for knowledge sharing, a chance for you to help someone learn something new and strengthen your own understanding along the way. And I don't know is also a surefire sign that the person you're talking to brings in a fresh perspective, something invaluable in combating common anti-patterns like the golden hammer or groupthink. And maybe the most useful piece of advice I can give you is to expect I don't knows and be proactive about taking measures to avoid them. Did you pull a wacky solution to something from Stack Overflow? Would it kill you to leave a comment in your code to explain it? Or how well documented is your project? Be obsessive about it. Make sure it's all there and well organized. All of these things will make you an awesome engineer in practice. And what they have in common is they rely on your ability to recognize and respect that the knowledge you have isn't a measuring stick for others. So no, saying I don't know isn't going to magically make you a better engineer. But being confident in what you do know, transparent about what you don't know, and building your career, teams, and processes around a realistic understanding of just how wide and varied software engineering really is will set you up for success. Thanks for watching.